Um, Thanks, Dimity. I'm totally daunted by this, and having met everyone in the room and the diversity of interests, you'll you'll appreciate that I come from a little bit of a narrow um, thought bubble since I arrived here in East Gippsland 25 years ago, and mainly the arts. But I'm going to do my best to get through this because I have a lot of slides because I do love telling the history of how we got to where we are, and I hope it means something to everyone who's working in the same field. My original background was economics. I studied economics back in the 70s at Melbourne Uni and have ended up as an arts tragic in East Gippsland, trying to make it valuable. Uh, what you just saw there was the float vessel, the floating art studio. My first real job probably was at BRW. I worked at Business Review Weekly for 25 years. Great place to work, but obviously the exact opposite to what I do now. But it was a great grounding in journalism and publishing. And I had the good fortune to work for Ross Greenwood, who sent me back to RMIT to learn to be a librarian, where they'd just invented the internet, which then allowed me to move out here to East Gippsland as a webmaster because we had dial-up out here, and I could produce all the Fairfax websites here in Now and Hour. My little kind of joke about that is that I went from the rich 200 to the poor 200 because I moved to Now and Hour, which is literally one of the poorest towns in East Gippsland. But as you can see, it's a beautiful place where you have a very rich life. So that was my introduction to the region. What I learned in a little town was there was a lot of local knowledge and a lot of skill, and I was actually surrounded by life drawing artists when I got here. And my journalism brain immediately went to Now and Now Nudes as an alliteration that became a great event for the region and became one of the most successful, highest prize money art show in East Gippsland, the Now and Now Nudes. So from then on, we made great connections, and I learned that nothing was really impossible for a very tiny group of, 4 people tapping into what was already happening in their region. I discovered the language of the art. I moved here to marry an artist. I fell in love with an artist. I came here, was surrounded by his network of artists. But I also learned about the importance of it as a social mover in the arts. And as I just mentioned in the little group we were in, how undervalued I found artists were. I could be paid to be telecommuting out here and be highly paid because I work for a Melbourne company out here. I've never had a job actually, because I identify as an artist now, I suppose, and that's really undervalued. So if there's a project, the arts are the first thing that get excluded from the budget, and the concrete gets poured. One of the standing jokes is that Andrea discovered fruit when she got here, because it's one of those things that just immediately jumped out to me as an asset that the region had, that knowledge people had. They all knew how to bottle fruit. They all knew how to share it. They all knew how to serve it. And we all sat around and ate a lot of fruit. Of course, I spelt it like this because that's my branding background, with the idea that it was a trail of backyard fruit. I met a blacksmith who designed this fruit cart for us. I got funding from Creative Victoria to build this fruit cart, which, 20 years later still works beautifully, and we serve fruit breakfasts all over the region in this beautiful teardrop van that Gary Belsky built for us. We took those fruit carts everywhere, and I kind of have to go back this far in history just to show how important it has been to build those connections, because every person that I met doing this is still a friend, is still part of the network, is still part of the reason why FLOAT succeeds as much as it does, because people believe in us, and the generosity and integrity and authenticity that we discovered through that fruit project and serving fruit breakfast has just held us in really good stead ever since. That's, if you don't know where we are, Southeast Australia, Far East Victoria, and they're all the places we serve fruit breakfast. I suppose one of the things that's been really important to us has been the branding. I think that's what has separated us from other arts organisations. It just didn't quite nail it, didn't quite have the young participants in the conversation. And this design was produced by a young girl who was working in Macca's at the time, Jess John. She was 15 years old. She loved what we were doing with fruit, and she kind of owned the brand after that. We took our fruit breakfast to the Melbourne Writers Festival because we were invited to cater for it, because they love what we were doing with locally grown fruit, locally made muesli, and just a really nice take on what we were doing in a place they'd never heard of and certainly never been to. Fruit breakfast evolved into Fruitville, which was an event that then lasted for the next 9 years until the pandemic. And basically we celebrated the greenies of the region, I suppose. The people who'd never had an event of their own before was suddenly very cool, because we had a winery who was willing to host us. We had artists who were willing to come and be part of this event. We had a sign that was made from an old food store. You might recognize that big food store kind of signage that was on old supermarkets back in the day. I can't see the man standing beside it, but that's my husband. That's why I thought you looked like my husband, Jim. We had meals that were catered for by amazing artists who'd come down to do residencies, and prepared a 7-course banquet on 44-gallon drums in the grounds of a winery. And this was, people were really starting to take notice of what we were doing. This was just a new level of maybe what we all take for granted now. But I have to say, 15 years ago, it was, who are these people? What are they doing? And of course, when Costa took notice, everyone started to take notice. Council suddenly realised that we were onto something that was kind of interesting. That experience of realising the value of arts and realising that we had to actually find the economic value of what we were doing, and I can't say we've totally succeeded at it yet, but we seem to be on a good journey, was social enterprise. And I got a grant from Creative Victoria, and Andy Miller said to me, Andrea, you're going to have to find an alternative to grants. And he enrolled me in the Social Traders Crunch program, where we were encouraged to develop a business plan for what we were doing with fruit. That turned out to be a business plan for a glamping tour for Far East Gippsland, where you would walk around the region and be fed local produce and be the experience of Far East Gippsland. Having an artist make our pitch for our business plan. This was made by a fantastic artist called Tony Adams, who was part of the Slow Art Collective. Some of you might know Chaco Cato and Tony Adams. And for me, that's what enriched everything we did, was having an artist touch on everything that we did. This was in our orchard at Now. Once we had the business plan, we pitched the idea of a glamping tour to architects, mainly student architects, and asked them to design what a campster would be. This was the winning design, which was Giant Grass in Melbourne, and they won $5,000 for their design. Just because everyone who entered paid, $50, I think, to enter, so we had enough to pay a prize. We then went on to build that campster by crowdfunding, and built this beautiful thing, the fruit pod, which still exists, and went pretty viral on the internet at the time as this amazing example of what we could experience in Far East Gippsland. That conversation led us to establish an artist-made travel bureau, and again, it just kept coming back to the business plan that we developed with the social traders, and trying to find ways to highlight the talent and the skills that we had to create a destination for Far East Gippsland. This was an artist in Ensay, in the high country, who had a beautiful studio, but it was burnt in the last fires, so all his work went with it. Big fan of Marcus Westbury and Renew Newcastle, which you maybe all know about. That very successful business plan he had of activating empty shops with artists. just sings to me like mad. They established a new centre at Docklands down in Melbourne, CBD, which we were lucky enough to score one of the spaces. This was it. I think it was $20 a week or something. And we were there for a year developing this idea of an artist-led travel bureau. So that's kind of the history that I hope makes sense as being important because of the legwork that money can't buy, you know. If you don't have a whole bunch of passionate people, there was no way of planning a feasibility study around what we were going to proceed on to. Float came next because we got the opportunity to apply for a small town transformation grant that Regional Arts Victoria were offering, and we won it, which was a $350,000 grant to build this vessel. That's our community. That's where I live. That's my front yard. That's the design of Float, which was done by Cameron Robbins, who you may know is a fairly amazing artist who does work down in Mona and now all over the world. He does environmental art, and it catches everyone's imagination. It's often wind generated and solar powered artworks that he does, and he led us on that journey. This was me at the tavern every Tuesday. So I show this because I think it was really important in our formative years to tap into the local knowledge, which I still believe just gets constantly overlooked. Again, as I think I just said in the breakout room, the knowledge is untapped and locals know it, but there's no connection between the visitors who come here and tapping into it. So, of course, what we have there is Auntie Phyllis, who came most Tuesdays, and we just make that routine of meeting every Tuesday to share our knowledge, and that was crucial to what we are 15 years later. What I call it now is the Communiversity, but it started with that conversation where people came and talked not just about art, but also the salinity of the lake, when the lake was going to break through, what the flora, what the fauna was, what the birds were, and all those things. So the regular meeting in a public place where you're welcomed by an excellent facilitator who allows everyone to speak was really important. We got the money, we built the boat. Massive exercise. This was a year on the lake of building this in situ. It's a beautiful boat, and this is us launching it a few years later. And that was just, as you can probably imagine, the beginning of a journey that allows us to invite artists from all around the world to come and stay on this boat and live there. It's fully functional, and they can stay for about 6 weeks on the lake. It's solar powered, donated by RACV Solar, and we're mainly run by volunteers, I suppose. That's where we fall down in our social enterprise, but we all really believe that actually the rich life that we get from running this boat outweighs what would be the cost of trying to run something like this commercially. Someone crunched those numbers early on in the business case, and it was just going to be ridiculous. What we do through bartering and belief in regenerative economics and tourism far outweighs what we could ever charge people to come and then exclude a whole lot of people from this experience. So it's very loved. Alice Pepper, local Gunai Kurnai woman who's fantastic. She was one of the first to come on board and has been one of our greatest advocates ever since. She's working in Parliament now in the Treaty People's Assembly. And so, of course, we're very proud to know it and for her to be one of our allies, because Lake Tyres Aboriginal Trust is directly opposite Float on Lake Tyres. So it's a really important relationship. I won't go on about the Communiversity. We're big fans of Gippslandia, a local newspaper, which is a social enterprise as well, and they rely so heavily on major sponsors and then medium-sized partners like us. So every time we get a grant for our work that we do, I always incorporate a fairly significant chunk of an advertising budget to make sure that this is editorial, I didn't actually pay for this, but we always take out an ad in every issue. And they love it because we also use it as part of our acquittal for every project. We're able to say, we placed an ad in a great newspaper that has redefined the Gippsland experience. And look, that's me wearing the same clothes. Nature journaling is a big part of what we do because of that combination with art and nature. That's Anne Harrod, who actually does all our illustrations, if you've seen our posters. But just getting people out walking and drawing and observing has been key to what we do. So our artists are very much environmental stewards. That's the artists that we seek. We don't look to just make things just for the hell of it, everything's about observing nature. And out of that, we grew our on-foot faculty so that we're developing the ability for us to deliver walks in our region. And I know that will extend right through East Gippsland. At the moment, we mainly focus around Lakes Entrance, which is where we're based predominantly. And we have a great ecotourism guy who leads these walks, often for free, but sometimes paid as well. So, and he comes with all the insurance and all the qualifications and all the skills required to run walks commercially. That evolved into a walking festival, which I guess speaks for itself. Artists coming to lead those walks in our region. This one was curated by Lichen Kelp. Some of you might know her. She's a fantastic artist who's very passionate about our untourism approach to the arts in regional places. The School of Untourism evolved out of all of this work. We got a grant from Creative Victoria. This was for a couple of years, so I think we got about 280,000, I think, for a couple of years to deliver what we do, because they just identified it as being so unique and so authentic, and that the money goes to the artists. We don't pay a lot in management fees or rent or any of those other things that gobble up your money. It goes to the experience. And School of Untourism really resonated with Creative Victoria, and it was in partnership with the National Gallery of Victoria and Open House Melbourne, who brought their crew down for 7 days to be part of what we delivered here. And I guess the image kind of speaks for itself. This was one of the highlights of the School of Untourism. It's Lichen Kelp at work with her partner, Dylan Martorell. They designed the kayak orchestra. So people came and paddled on the lake in a fairly, mindful way with all these instruments that Dylan made from local objects, I guess. And that's recently just gone down to the Unconformity Festival in Queenstown, which I think is the best festival of place around. Having only been there once, but it blew my mind. So I feel like we're in very good company with what we do. I'm just showing that to say our idea of a communiversity is underused spaces, that we didn't build any, we don't manage them, we don't look after them, we don't have to mow the lawns, we just use space that's otherwise neglected or commercial or privately owned or available to us on what we pay one commercial lease at the slipway. We built the observatorium to attach it to Float because one of the biggest problems of running a floating art studio is the compost loo. And that's all been specially designed so that there's virtually no impact. I'll say virtually no impact because we know that there is always an impact on living on the lake. It's minimal, but that's Isaac, who's our float keeper. And in response for thanks for the free accommodation that we offer him for his tiny home on some property up the road, he looks after Float and makes sure that everything runs smoothly and inducts all the artists onto the Float. So he's a massive environmentalist. He's come down from Goongerah, where he's been protecting the forest for the last 10 years or so. That's Float from a distance on Lake Tyres, which is a Ramsar listed lake. So it's pretty pristine and pretty beautiful, and we look after it pretty well. The slipway sheds has been a more recent arrival. We've had our eye on it for about 5 years. It took that long through the pandemic for council to take over the management of it and restore the structure of it. But yeah, empty for 20 years, and it was where the fishermen all built their boats and brought their fishing catch. This is one of the members of the Slipway Collective, Sam Maluk. She's a chef, cooks local seafood, and was married to a fisherman. So she operates out of the Slipway, and she's just a really good example of someone who took sardines that were being sent to Melbourne as cat food and turned it into a delicacy in Lakes Entrance, because we discovered that in France that sardines are a beautiful food if you put nice slabs of freshly grown tomatoes on them. And that's the inside of the slipway, pretty authentically kept. Occasionally we have musical events, we have postcard events that pay the rent pretty well. And I discovered when the woman who submitted this artwork, it's a postcard, it's actually only postcard size, but he's one of the original fishermen from the slipway, Tiny Mitchelson. So one of the fishermen kind of immortalised a bit in our exhibition. Uncle Lenny and his wife Barb have been making bags for us, because what we learned through collaborating with the Purpose Precinct, so Beck Scott of Street, has pushed us, or encouraged us to go for this nature journaling angle at the slipway, and Barb's able to make these bags that become our nature journaling totes, so we can actually run a more viable social enterprise here. We have an open mic. Olivia here is 23. She's local. She runs it all. I don't have to do a thing, and she's just being able to give people that freedom, free rent to do what they love. They make it work, and I turn up every now and again and say hi, but basically Olivia does all the work on this. The Feral MBA, I hope you explore at some date, future date, because it is the key to our destination, I think. I won't say any more about it. Come and have a look on the website. That's the Feral MBA convening for the first session at our Iceworks studio. And this was one of the artistic outcomes of the Feral MBA, and I threw it in because at the end of the Feral MBA, they do make, they spend the whole time designing their business plan, and their last session is to exhibit an artwork that explains their business plan. This was Nat from Mona, who came and installed this in the studio. Mona now want our Feral MBA next year. We've told them they can't have it, but I think they're going to do a youth-focused one. So we're pretty happy with that. It's an endorsement of the amazing conversations that happen at a Feral MBA. And I'll just do that. I guess I just wanted to show that because Sasha, who was on the synthesizer, who was a Feral MBA graduate, bonded with Rolly, who makes his own digers, and they jammed together at the open mic. And again, you just can't orchestrate this stuff unless you've got an open door that lets people do what they want without imposing all the barriers. We've now built a School of the Arts, which was designed by a school refuser who dropped out of school because she hated it and was bullied and was just so creative, it was unbearable. So we've designed a curriculum around that. She's renamed it the Float Camp because she didn't like the word school being in the title of what we do. And that's given us a lot more flexibility, and people understand that it's not about coming and having to learn, be treated how you were treated at school. That's Amy, making the lanterns for our winter festival at the Iceworks, and she just absolutely rose to the occasion. She's 18 now, but she was 16 when we started the conversation. She's become an illustrator. The one thing I'll mention about Sam here, who's a 3D printer artist, he's also a guitar maker, a luthier. He graduated from TAFE back in the day a little bit before our TAFE disappeared. We don't have an arts department anymore in TAFE, where it was previously where kind of our finest came through. Everybody, if you didn't know exactly what you wanted to do, you went to TAFE and you learned so much about life. So Sam is one of those graduates, and now he's one of our teachers at the art school that we run. That's what he made for me, clickers for the Winter Festival out of recycled plastic. Zines, this is kind of us standing at the Iceworks getting ready for the Winter Festival. That's what the Winter Festival looks like in full swing. it's not quite as regenerative as we'd like. I think we've still got work to do in less waste and being a little more less about the metrics and the numbers and the big that Visit Victoria still want from us. But it looks pretty beautiful and the community absolutely love it. So yeah, that's me trying to raise. I don't know how I did time-wise. I give up. But anyway, hopefully that was made some sense and it was of some use for ongoing conversation.
That's amazing. Thank you so much. I think we'll just give you like round of applause for sharing. I think it's such an extraordinary ecosystem of entrepreneurial and creative expression. It's just so tremendous. I'm sure everyone's got a load of insight from that conversation and what I'd love, and I don't know what I've done here, is really to take a moment to reflect on that example of float and what nutrients you gleaned from it, for yourself, for the enterprise that you're leading, and also for the place, like that deep connection to place and the opportunities that emerge from that. Just want to give you a few moments to do that. And also any questions that you have, if you want to pop those in the chat. I'm going to put you into small groups again in a moment. There'll be possibly different groups, just to introduce yourself again to each other and share what nutrients came up for you, and why those nutrients are useful for you and your enterprise. And maybe there's a whole bunch of things bubbling up for you. What can you be considering for your place? And then we'll share back at after about 10 minutes of time in our groups. Does that sound okay? But please pop some questions in the chat so Andrea can be thinking about answering those, which we'll either can answer those during our session if we've got time, or after our session on an email. And I think Katie or Talara, if you've popped the questions into the chat, you probably have done that already. And I'll move you into groups. Just recreate and make 4 rooms. I think it's about 4 folks in each. Is that pretty clear what I've asked you to talk through and share? All right, just 10 minutes. Have an opportunity to share your insights. Thank you.